Your day was completely incomplete without his good morning text, and until you hugged him 20 times a day, your battery level stayed chronically low. You were the quintessential clingy girlfriend, the kind of person who always curled up against his shoulder while he was trying to work, asked for a kiss every 5 minutes just because you liked the reassurance, and constantly craved his attention. To you, love was something to be felt physically, loudly, and constantly. Your boyfriend, Aarav, was the exact opposite on the surface. He was calm, deeply practical, and focused, but he had always seemed to be deeply in love with your needy nature, often smiling and wrapping his arms around you whenever you demanded his time. Or at least, that is what you had completely believed until that one fateful Tuesday evening. Aarav had gone to the restroom, leaving his phone face up on the bed, and when the screen lit up with a notification, you happened to look over. It was a Reddit thread title that made your stomach instantly drop. What do you do when your girlfriend is too dependent and attention-needy? It's getting suffocating. Your throat went completely dry when you tapped the preview and saw that Aarav had not only upvoted the post, but he had also saved a top comment that read, "Give her space immediately, otherwise you will lose your mind and grow to resent her." A million terrifying questions began to race through your mind in that single moment, making you feel physically sick as you wondered if Aarav was secretly tired of you, if your constant need for affection was actually a heavy burden to him, and if you were slowly suffocating the person you loved the most. Driven by a sudden, overwhelming wave of insecurity and fear of losing him, you made a firm, painful resolve right then and there that you were going to change your entire behavior, step back, and finally give him the breathing room you thought he was begging for. The very next morning, the agonizing test of your willpower began. Usually, your morning routine involved waking up early, sneaking up behind Aarav while he brewed coffee in the kitchen, wrapping your arms tightly around his waist, and planting a soft kiss on his shoulder blades. But today, you forced your feet to walk straight past the kitchen and went to sit quietly at the dining table, staring blankly at your phone screen. When Aarav noticed you and brought over your favorite mug, smiling warmly as he gently ruffled your messy morning hair and muttered a sweet good morning, your heart pulled painfully. Normally, you would have squealed with joy, pulled him down by his collar, and climbed right into his lap to start the day. Today, you forced yourself to just look up, offer a completely flat, polite smile, and say a quiet, distant thank you before returning to your phone. Aarav leaned against the kitchen counter for a long moment, watching you with a slightly puzzled expression, but he ultimately figured you were just exhausted or half asleep and chose not to press you about it. But the strange, cold behavior did not stop there, as you spent the rest of the week putting up an invisible wall between the two of you. When he returned home from work that evening, you did not run to the front door to greet him with a hug like you always did. Instead, you stayed in the bedroom, typing away furiously on your laptop to look busy. He eventually walked into the room, set his bag down, and sat next to you on the edge of the bed, gently nudging your shoulder to ask why he hadn't received a single kiss all day. Your heart was breaking into a million pieces inside your chest because you wanted nothing more than to throw your arms around his neck, but you forced yourself to stay entirely restrained. You leaned over, gave him a quick, dry, almost formal peck on the cheek, and told him you were just incredibly busy with work before asking him to go ahead and freshen up. One day of this treatment turned into 3, and 3 days quickly stretched into a long, miserable week where you gave Aarav the ultimate space. You completely stopped calling him during his lunch breaks, stopped sending him the random, sweet paragraphs about how much you missed him, and when you watched movies together at night, you sat on the absolute opposite end of the couch instead of resting your head on his chest. You genuinely thought you were being the perfect, mature, and understanding partner by finally giving him the space you believed he secretly desired. But you had absolutely no idea that Aarav was secretly spiraling into a state of total panic and confusion. He had deeply noticed that the bubbly, chaotic, and incredibly affectionate girl who used to fill the entire apartment with warmth and laughter had suddenly vanished into thin air. In her place was a polite, quiet, and completely distant roommate who treated him more like an acquaintance than a boyfriend. Aarav found himself completely unable to focus at his desk during work hours, staring blankly at his laptop because his phone no longer buzzed every hour with silly memes or demands for attention. He found himself constantly checking his lock screen, desperately hoping for a single text message from you, only to be met with total deafening silence. He didn't feel free or relieved at all. Instead, he felt utterly abandoned, unloved, and terrified that you were secretly falling out of love with him. By Friday evening, the tension in the apartment had grown so thick it was heavy enough to breathe, and dinner was a completely agonizing, silent affair where the only sound was the occasional clinking of silverware against porcelain plates. You kept your eyes firmly glued to your food, deliberately avoiding his gaze because you knew that if you looked into his eyes for too long, your resolve would completely crumble. Suddenly, the silence was shattered when Aarav slammed his fork down onto the table with enough force to make you flinch. His face was pale, his jaw was clenched, and his eyes were filled with a raw mixture of intense anger and deep, vulnerable hurt. When you asked him what was wrong, he stood up, walked over to your side of the table, and dropped directly to his knees so that he was at exact eye level with you, grabbing both of your hands in a grip that was tight and trembling. He demanded to know what he had done wrong, begging you to tell him why you had been pulling away from him for a whole week, and asking with a cracking voice if you were planning on breaking up with him. Seeing the genuine, terrifying vulnerability in his eyes, the emotional dam you had built up over the week completely broke, and hot tears began to flood down your cheeks as you finally confessed everything. You sobbed openly, telling him about the Reddit post you had seen on his phone, how you saw he had upvoted it, and how you realized that your attention-needy nature was suffocating him, which made you decide to change yourself so he wouldn't grow to hate you. Aarav stared at you in absolute stunned shock for a few seconds as the pieces finally clicked together in his head. Then a massive wave of profound relief washed over his face, and he let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh before pulling you out of your chair and wrapping his arms around you so fiercely that you could barely breathe. He whispered into your hair that you were an absolute dummy, explaining that he had only upvoted and saved that thread because a coworker's new relationship was falling apart, and he was trying to find advice to send to his friend. Aarav cupped your tear-stained face in his warm hands, wiping away the moisture with his thumbs, as he confessed that he absolutely loved your clinginess and your dependency because your constant demands for kisses made him feel like the most important person in the world. He told you that this new, quiet version of you was what was actually suffocating him, whereas your love never could. Hearing his words, the heavy, suffocating knot in your chest completely dissolved, and you buried your face back into his neck, locking your arms tightly around him as you sniffled and told him he now owed you a whole week's worth of missed affection with heavy interest. Aarav laughed loudly, lifting you effortlessly into his arms as he promised to pay it all back, instantly erasing the cold silence of the past week and replacing it with the familiar, beautiful warmth of a needy girlfriend and a boyfriend who wanted nothing more than to give her his undivided attention.